All right, so today we're looking at a source that gives us two very, very different pitches, one right after the other. First, we're diving into an economic policy aimed at families. And then we take this wild turn into the world of high fashion with Melania Trump. It's a bit of whiplash for sure, so let's break down exactly what's going on.
So let's just start with a huge number right out of the gate. 1 million. According to the source, that's how many people signed up for these Trump accounts in just a single week. So what in the world are they, and what's the deal with this massive number?
Here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start with that million-person pitch and figure out what a Trump account is supposed to be, including this politician-proof promise they talk about. Then we'll make that sharp pivot to the fashion world's so-called snub of Melania Trump and how she responded. All right, let's dive in.
Okay, first up, a million-person pitch. The source sets this whole thing up by focusing on a very specific economic challenge that it says American families are really grappling with right now.
So this policy, it's really positioned as a direct answer to what the source claims the opposition's stance is, especially when it comes to abortion in poorer communities. The guest you see quoted here, Rachel Campos-Duffy, she basically boils the issue down to a choice. Either make it more affordable for people to have kids, or don't.
So, if that's the problem they're laying out, what's the solution they're offering? Well, that brings us right to the Trump account itself. Let's get into what it is.
Okay, so what is a Trump account, at least according to this source? Well, it's defined as a new kind of savings account for newborn babies. It would get a starting contribution from the government, and the whole idea is to give families a bit of a financial head start.
And the source gets pretty specific with the details. We're talking an initial contribution of $1,000 for any child born between 2025 and 2028. It also says 250 million families would be eligible, with a real focus on working class and poorer communities. And to really drive home its appeal, the source repeatedly brings up an event with the rapper Nicki Minaj.
But there's another piece to this that the source really emphasizes as a key selling point. And that brings us to our next section. This politician-proof promise.
The big idea here is all about security. The host in the clip, Charlie Kirk, makes this very direct promise. This money is attached to the person, not the government. This is presented as this core guarantee, to make it sound different from other federal funds like Social Security.
Now, this promise of security is meant to deliver on two bigger ideas mentioned in the clip. First, of course, is the idea of long-term financial security for the child. But second, the guests suggest it's also a chance for financial education, that kids will grow up knowing about their account and maybe learn a little about money along the way.
Okay, and now, get ready for a complete 180. We are slamming on the brakes and shifting gears big time. We're going from economic policy to cultural commentary. It is pretty jarring, honestly, but it's all part of the communication strategy we're looking at. So that brings us here, the fashion world's snub, which is a very different kind of problem.
So this slide really breaks down the two sides of the argument as they're laid out in the interview. On one side, you have the interviewer framing it like this. The gatekeepers of fashion are holding back the recognition she deserves and are being not very kind. And on the other side, you've got Melania Trump's stated view. It's my life, I dress for myself, and, they can think whatever they want.
All right, so that's how the problem is framed. What about the response? Let's dig into Section 5, Melania Trump's response, her side of the story.
So her full answer really gives more context here. She starts by saying, yeah, I was in fashion business for a long time, but then she completely reframes things. She basically says her priorities have just changed and she's moved on from needing that kind of approval. Her mission, as she puts it, is much more than that now.
Then, one of the show's guests comes in with a very, let's say, blunt translation of that message. According to Rachel Campos-Duffy, what Melania Trump is really saying is, Vogue who? So this interpretation paints it not just as a statement about personal priorities, but as a direct dismissal of the fashion industry's relevance to her.
So let's step back for a second and look at the big picture. The source gave us two totally separate narratives, right? But it structured them in the exact same way. Here's a problem, and here's a solution. First, you have the economic problem of family affordability, with the solution being these tangible Trump accounts. Then you have the cultural problem of a fashion snub, with the resolution being her personal sense of mission. Same structure, completely different worlds.
And that really leads us to the final question to think about. When you take two very different issues,
one a national economic policy, the other a personal cultural dispute, and you frame both of them in this very simple, very neat problem and solution package, how does that shape the way an audience sees things? It's a pretty powerful communication technique for sure, presenting clear-cut answers to very complex topics. Thanks for watching.